So you've decided that you were going to treat yourself to some alcohol markers. You jump on Amazon and then feel really overwhelmed by the hundreds of options that there are available. As someone who absolutely loves alcohol markers and has been using them for over 20 years, I really want you to enjoy them too, because they are an amazing art supply. So I thought I would buy a whole load, do a little bit of comparison to possibly help you cut through and decide what alcohol markers work best for you. Quick disclaimer, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds on Amazon. I have not purchased that amount. My budget does not allow. But I've purchased what I can, and also as I will be using these pens afterwards, I personally have found that I like a brush nib, so every option that I have looked at does have a brush nib. Anyway, without further ado, let's have a little closer look at what I bought and what the results are. Okay, so I bought these Yisan markers, and I bought these ones, I chose these ones out of all the ones that were available because at the time they were the most budget friendly ones that I could find. So this set cost me £8.98 and that was for 48 pens, which meant that I paid 18 pence per pen. I can't find them on Amazon at the moment, but I think they're the sort of things that, you know, they pop in and out. So if you do fancy these ones by the end of watching the review, I would just keep checking Amazon. One thing I did like about these is the box had great compartments, so it's brilliant for keeping your pens organised, although like all alcohol markers, I had to organise them. They didn't sort of come with any sort of sensible colour story, so that was really good. The colour system I find a little bit questionable. I've like really realised that how colours are numbered or lettered really matter to me for some particular reason. But the colours didn't sort of seem to follow, the numbers and the colours didn't seem to kind of follow any sensible system, so I don't think they're of much help whatsoever. I did find quite a few issues with these pens, so I think it's one of these examples that, you know, you buy cheap, you buy twice. So on some of these pens, the nib, the colour was faded, so on half of the nib you got colour, on the half of the nib it was almost like it was just the blender, so that was really weird. Also, I came across quite a few pens that were dry before we'd even started, so obviously that is not good. Also, whilst using these pens, I just found the nibs so soft that it made them really difficult to use. So I really struggled when I was trying to create a bit of a flicking technique, partly because of the brush just being so soft, and partly because as I was using it, it was beginning to fray quite a bit. So the colours that were available when I was doing the colouring page, I wanted to create a see-through vase, but the lack of colour made that quite impossible because there was no blender and no pale colours. I also, as I've mentioned, I struggled with the flicking technique, which also meant that I struggled getting any form of texture in the cat. Now, I did manage to create some texture, but I think this is down to the fact that I've been using alcohol markers for 20 odd years, so had a few tricks up my sleeve and I was able to kind of problem solve it a little bit. But I think if you were brand new to markers and you were trying to create some of these effects, this pen isn't going to work with you to help you build up your confidence. I think sometimes that it is really good to get the best you can afford. And if these are the best you can afford, then fine. But if you can afford something slightly better, I would go with something slightly better, because I think what you will find is you will try and use them, you'll not get the best results, and then you'll maybe put that on yourself as opposed to on the medium and the products that you are using. I did find, although we had 48 pens, there was a severe lack of greys. We only had like one warm grey and the rest were blue grey. So it meant creating shadows really difficult because a lot of the greys were completely in the wrong tone. And also the variety of colours that are available, despite it being 48 pens, it was very difficult to create a sort of cohesive blend when it came to either shading one colour or transitioning between one colour and another, whereas with 48 pens you should be able to have enough colours within that you get a decent blend, but I still struggled. So overall, I can't say I would recommend these pens. I would personally give them a miss. As I said earlier, I don't particularly feel that getting the cheapest is the best, especially if it affects your the fun that you're having, the enjoyment that you get whilst you're doing it, and how you feel about the end results. So I wouldn't be purchasing these again, but as an overall review, these cost 18p per pen. There are 48 colours available. I didn't find they blend well. I didn't like the colour system that they had. I didn't like the nib, it frayed really easily. There was no refills, which we will go into with all the pens, but I do think refills are important, partly because of the cost, because it means as you run out of a colour, if you can refill it, you're not having to pay for the whole pen again. And also, if you don't have refills, once the pen's gone, it ends up being disposed of, which is also a environmental issue as well. So refills are important to me, and there's no refills for this pen, but they were fairly ergonomic and easy to use. So that is the Yisan pens. The next pens that I decided to take a closer look at were the Sanjoki pens. The reason I chose these ones is that I have reviewed alcohol markers before, and when I did in that particular video, I was asked a number of times in the comment section what I thought of the Sanjoki pens and would I recommend them. So I have bought some to have a look. So the set I bought came with 119 markers, and I spent £47.50 on them, which makes these 39p per pen. Now I have to say the packaging, absolutely fabulous. Out of all the pens that I reviewed, the packaging on this is the best. It comes in this gorgeous grey bag. It's really, really sturdy. It looks gorgeous, and it also is really user friendly. You can kind of tip it on an angle so that you can have your pens on display and take them out as you're using them, which is really, really handy. The colour system's okay. It's just numerical. It doesn't go into the pigment colour and the value, but the numbers make sense. There's a couple of little blips where they don't. I do understand 121 to 125 not being within their colour family because they're more fluorescent, and quite a few brands can keep their fluorescent pens separate, including Copic. But I don't understand why we suddenly jump from a number system to a lettering system when we hit the greys. I think if you're going to do one, you either stick to one or the other, but that's a personal thing. It doesn't actually affect the performance of the pen. But I've discovered that these little things are quite important to me. Now, I question the number of reds. There are a lot of reds, and I'm a red girl. It's one of my favourite colours. But the problem I have with it is all the reds are so similar. It kind of seems a bit pointless having them. You've not got enough of a difference between one red and the next to be able to create those shadows, midtones and highlights. So I think we needed more variety in those. So although we've got a lot of colours, there's a lot that are so close that they're completely pointless, to be honest. And reds is a really good example of that. I did struggle with the flicking technique on this. I think the nibs are actually really quite soft, but I think it is something that I could get there with a little bit more practice. Now, when it came to the colouring page, and it's interesting with our colouring pages because they are not marker paper. They're not designed to take markers, and so they're a little bit more textured than a marker paper would be. And I noticed that when it came to using these pens on your colouring page, the nibs were almost too soft to be used, and as I was using them on the colouring page, they did start to slightly misshapen and fray ever so slightly. I also find the nibs were very hit and miss. Although I've said they're very soft, there were some that were a lot stiffer, so you didn't really know what you were getting, which is hard to kind of get into a flow and learn how to use your pens if all the nibs feel differently. I used 19 markers in total to create this particular colouring page. So in review of these markers, they cost between 33p and 47p per pen. There are 120 colours available. Now, the colouring system's not my favourite, but it's okay, I can't complain about it. Refillable, yes they are, which is good. They are difficult to source. Apparently they are refillable, but I can't particularly find the refills here in the UK, but at least it's possible. The nib, not my favourite. There's too much variation between pens for it to be cohesive, so the nib doesn't get a vote for me, but I do find them quite ergonomic to use. They've got a nice round barrel. So the next pens I decided to try were the Shuttle art pens. I bought these as when I turned on Amazon to have a little look for this video, they came up as Amazon recommended. So I paid £29.99 for 50 pens, which means they were 59 pence per pen. Now I'm kind of really unsure on the colouring system. There is both numbers and names, but again, they don't seem to follow any sort of shade tone format, which I think is important, but you know, I suppose it might not be to everyone, but it's a bit of a flaky colouring system, we'll say that. They are really, really juicy, and I absolutely love these. Now, by mistake, I bought the pens that were both a brush tip and a fine nib. Oh my goodness, this was revolutionary. I need a brush nib, which is why all the markers that I've tested have brush nibs, because I only use a brush nib. I don't particularly like a bullet nib. But although I use brush nibs, all of my pens have a chisel nib at the other end. So having both a brush nib and a fine nib, wow, that was a bit of a game changer, because I was able to get all my nice effects and my blended effects with the brush nib, but I was able to add fine details with the fine nib, which was amazing. So I have to say, out of all the pens, these are ones I want to go and buy more of. In fact, I went to have a look, but because I bought the pastel option for this particular set, and I do want to kind of get the other option, but it's not currently available on Amazon, but apparently it is. You can get it with both a fine liner. Once I realised such a pen was available, I went to have another look to see if other brands did this, and apparently Ohuhu also do this sort of combo as well, but absolutely love it. I also went for the pastel colours because there was really good options for skin colours, and I do a lot of character colouring, so it was important for me. However, having said that, although I went for the pastel option, there was some slightly deeper colours, and there was also some really good greys, which meant I was still actually able to build up colour and build up depth even though they were the pastel pens, so that was really good. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed using these pens. They are really juicy. They've got a really nice nib. It's hard to describe. It's not too firm, it's not too flexible. It's just really, really good. And as I said, I was able to layer colour up really well. And out of all the pens I've bought, these are the ones I want to go and buy more of. So absolutely love these. They worked well on both the paper designed for alcohol markers and in the colouring book. And what I really liked about it in the colouring book was, again, because we had this fine tip, it allowed you to get really, really creative. Normally when you want to start adding creative details and little drawn lines or dots and things like that, we start pulling in gel pens or acrylic markers and bits and pieces like that. Whereas actually we could do all of this with the one marker, which I thought was really, really good. So absolutely love these pens, and I think as a starter set, these are really, really good. So the cost of these markers is either 40 to 60 pence per pen, depending on the size of container that you buy. There are 120 colours available, although there's only 20 to 40 colours available for the combination of the brush and fine nib combo. So there's a 120 colours of the brush and chisel nib, but 20 to 40 colours of the brush and fine nib. They are not refillable, which is a real shame, because yeah, I think, again, price and environmentally it's important, but these are not refillable, so they're a one-use pen. The nibs are gorgeous, and the it's very ergonomic as well. So I really, really like these pens, and as a good budget pen, as a starter thing, I would recommend these pens. I love them. The next pens I decided to take a look at are the Himi pens. Now basically I bought these because I have their jelly gouache, which is really fun, and I really enjoy that as a product. So I thought, let's take a look at some of their other art products. Nope, they do not do alcohol markers well. Absolutely hate everything about these pens. We will break it down and go into why. But no, and that was an expensive mistake. So these pens were £44.99 for 80 colours, which work out at 56 pence per pen. At least the other pens that I hated, the Yasmin ones, that was an £8 mistake instead of a £40-odd mistake. The box looks nice, but even before we get to colouring, these pens drove me insane. So although the box looks nice, it was a nightmare to actually get the pens out of the box. You couldn't get a proper grip of them, so they kept falling out of your hand before you could get hold of them. Honestly, even taking the pens out of the box was an ordeal. Then don't get me started on the shape of them. They are so horrible to hold. Yeah, really not comfortable at all. I have to say that as I started doing the colouring page, I did manage to get it to a point where I was able to colour with a little bit more comfort. I found a way that was slightly more comfortable, but still not ideal. Still really don't like them. Also, the nib was so firm. So there wasn't much flexibility, which again affected things like flicking, and also because the nib was so firm against the colouring page, which is a bit more difficult for any alcohol markers, but it was so firm that you could actually hear the nib grating against the page. You could actually kind of hear the damage that was being done to the nib. And it felt really scratchy to try and colour, so it was a very difficult pen to try and use. Yeah, I don't really like anything about this pen at all, but we'll do the overview. So the cost of these pens range between 53 pence and 60 pence per pen. The colours, there's 80 colours in the collection. Again, there's no refills to these ones. Ergonomically, nope. The nib is a big no, but their colour system does make sense. It's just a numerical one, but it makes sense and it's easy to follow. But despite that, I would not be recommending these pens at all. Okay, so the next ones are Arteza, and I bought these because they tend to be a very highly advertised, promoted brand. They tend to send a lot of their products out to various YouTubers and stuff. You see a lot of sponsored videos by Arteza. So I know that they're advertised a lot, so people will have seen them, so I decided to give them a try. Now with these ones, I only bought 12 markers, partly because I knew I probably wouldn't use them. I tend to prefer a round barrel. I think when it comes to pens, you just have to know what you particularly like. So I prefer a round barrel, and I find the triangular barrels really quite difficult to use. So I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. So I only got a small set, and I did go for a pastel set. I don't think I got the best set to be able to demonstrate how well or not well these particular pens worked. But if you're buying a 12 set, I don't think there's enough in it to do good colouring. I got the pastel set, but unlike the other pastel set that I got, the fact that there was a lack of greys or the lack of just a couple of deeper colours, it made it really difficult to get that range of shadow area to highlight. Despite the lack of greys, because they do blend exceptionally well, I did manage to build up shadows. I just gonna have to think out the box a little bit. So by using the lilac and the blue, I did manage to build it up so that we did manage to get that variation of tone when it came to colouring. The numbering system works really well. No issues with that at all. And as I said, ergonomically, they're just not my favourite. I did struggle again with the colouring page. The type of nib it was, again, you felt the scratchiness of the fact that you weren't working on marker paper, and that did affect the flow. So I think you would kind of damage Arteza pens using them in a colouring book, unless the colouring book had been specifically designed for markers. I'm not sure, as I said, that I'm giving the best review. I think in comparison to some of the other pens that I've reviewed, I had more markers to play with to try and make it work. And this is such a small set, I'm not sure that it's a fair assessment. But yeah, all I can do is say that and hope that the information that I've put together was still useful anyway. So the cost, depending on the size that you buy, it's 80 pence to 175 pence per pen. There are 120 colours available. The colouring system works absolutely fine. Yes, they are refillable. You can get replacement inks, although again, they're a little bit more difficult to source. You probably have to sell directly with, buy directly from Arteza. I'm based in the UK, so there isn't an Arteza in the UK, which does mean you would have to go through Europe. which obviously then you have customs charges and things to take into consideration. But at least they have provided refills, which I salute. And the nib, it works okay, it just doesn't particularly like colouring pages. And finally, we are going to take a look at Ohuhu markers. So these are the most advertised and well-known brand, and they are known for being the best Copic dupe out here. So depending on the size that you get, the pens range from 58 pence to 83 pence per pen, which when you consider Copics range from £3 to £7 per pen, that is a huge difference. Now I've had mine for 2 years, so these aren't a new purchase. And I have previously been a die-hard Copic fan. If you see my previous review, you can see that I absolutely love my Copics, and at the end of that video I still say that Copics are my favourite for various reasons. I'm not sure that I would say that now. I actually love the Ohuhu markers, and although the Copics are sat beautifully by my desk, I quite often find myself reaching for the Ohuhu markers. I still love my Copics, and there are a few things that would still give the edge, but to be honest, not much. So the thing that is difficult for me, and the only reason that Copics still have the edge for me, is yes, these pens are refillable and you can buy refills, which is great, but for me here in the UK, the refills are really difficult to get hold of, whereas I can easily access Copic refills. So if Ohuhu refills became more readily available in the UK, I would absolutely claim Ohuhu markers as my favourite brand. They probably still are at the minute, but that's the one minor frustration that I do have. I still think that their colour system is ridiculous. I have never been so upset or annoyed with a colour system that we have had. How in the same colour family you can have an orangey red, a purpley red and a blue, I just don't know. I also don't know why we need browns and earth tones. I also don't know why we need red, violets and purples. I kind of feel like we had colours and then they made more colours and they tried to slot them in. And I just think if you are a new user to alcohol markers, the colouring system is not going to help you. You can't particularly go by the colouring system and expect a good blend. It's going to take time for you playing with them, which is what I've done. I've played with them. I've made little charts of colours that blend well together. So if you take the time to do that, then absolutely they're brilliant. But you can't just sit there and look at their colouring system and think and work it out. Whereas with Copics, they are so easy. You know that if you pick on YR 14, 16 and 18, that it's all going to work. You don't have that same confidence with the Ohuhu markers, which drives me insane. If they would fix that, then I'd be delighted. But out of all the colour charts out there, Ohuhu is the worst. Sorry, but it just, yeah, I still struggle with that. But anyway, it's not stopped, that fact has not stopped this now becoming my most reached for pen. And I also have to say that whilst you cannot get refills easily within the UK, I have now been colouring with mine for about 2 years, and as yet I've not needed to refill a pen. I don't tend to do like huge colouring pages. Although I have in this video, my colouring tends to be stamped images and things like that. So that might be why, because I do know that I've looked at other artists who've had their pens for less time than me and have found that some are going dry. But I think that's maybe because they're colouring entire backgrounds using their pens, whereas that's not something I tend to do. But yeah, I still think this is a great pen. So the cost, as we've said, is 58 pence to 83 pence per pen. The colours available are 320. So out of all the pens that we've reviewed, this one has the most colours available. And as a colour magpie, I just can't help but love that, which would probably give them the slight edge over some of the others. Refills, we've covered that. They are refillable. Not all of their colours are refillable. It's quite funny. In my last video, I had somebody say that I was, what was it? It wasn't dishonest. It was some very derogatory term anyway, despicable or something like that, because I didn't mention that there was a limited number of refills. I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, there's a limited number of refills. So there's not a refill for every single colour, but there are refills available. I do find them very ergonomic. It's a barrel that I like, which is good. The nib works really well. At first, when I first tried these, I found the nibs quite firm in comparison to Copics, but actually now I prefer their nibs over Copics because the fact that they are slightly firmer means detail colouring is a little bit easier, which is good. So yeah, that is the Ohuhu markers. Final thoughts. It's been so much fun. I love colouring with lots of pens, but final thoughts. If I was starting out on a budget and I wanted to buy a limited number of pens, I would go for the Shuttle art ones. I really enjoyed using these. They are really good budget brand. The quality is fantastic, and in fact I will be looking for more of these. When I find the fine liners in the bright colours, I'll absolutely be buying these. Purely just because of the amount of colours that there are, and I am a colour magpie. I still think Ohuhu gets my top recommendation. If you would like to learn more about alcohol markers and see other brands compared as well, I have done a previous videos where we look at Copics, Pro markers, Twin markers, Spectrum Noir, and the Ohuhu. I think those are all the ones we compare. If you're interested in learning more about those particular brands, you can check out that video right here.